Hi, today we are going to talk about League of Legends. I know it's a wide topic and nobody wants to talk about League of Legends, but to be honest, I kind of do. I played League of Legends a lot when I was younger, and even though I played it a lot, I didn't really have any connections to the backstory because it isn't really visible in the gameplay. So when I had the opportunity to look at it in a meaningful way, I kind of choose it. Um, but before we look at how femininity is constructed in League of Legends, we kind of need a frame of what we look at and so on. So I will only look at the source material we can find on the League of Legends page. So only the backstories that are available there. I won't be looking at champions that are not in League of Legends. I won't be looking at, for example, Arcane, the series, and I won't be looking at champion interactions in game, and I also only will be looking at the backstories of the female champions because there are 172 champions, from which 68 are female, and this is kind of enough for our analysis to work with without going too much into detail. And this way, I will have a look at each female champion from region to region and see how the femininity is constructed. But before we start to talk about all of this, we need kind of a definition of femininity. We will look at femininity and gender as social constructs rather than natural or fixed. Um, by that, we will draw on the ideas associated with Simone de Beauvoir and Judith Butler. Um, we will understand it, sorry, say it, as construct. So it's shaped by culture, behavior, expectations, and its performativity. This allows us to see femininity as a pattern instead of just different features in different backstories. So, but now let's get to the nitty and gritty part of this whole podcast, where we are looking at how femininity is constructed in Runeterra. I will now first start to look at the regions where femininity isn't really defined in any way, and where it feels like that the whole concept of gender is kind of not really existent. And yeah, uh, that's why we started with Shurima and Targon. Just for information, Shurima is kind of a desert area, while Targon is a mountain range around Mount Targon. And in these areas, femininity isn't defined. Shurima is shaped by an imperial mythological imaginary, but female champions' backstory do not depend on being female. Similarly, is Targon, where it is talked about celestial beings and the celestial ascension, but this kind of ignores the whole concept of gender and focuses on who's worthy to ascend to godhood. Another one of these places is the Void. The Void makes an analysis of gender almost impossible in a meaningful way. The region's champions are defined more by being alien to the whole world of Runeterra. The two champions, female champions existing there are Rek'Sai and Bel'Veth, and there are not any indications of any gender roles or whatsoever. And even Kaiser, who is not a traditional Void champion who existed from the Void but was human before and became engulfed in the Void by fighting it, doesn't follow any gender roles. She is just she's protecting, yeah, but it's more like protecting other humans and not because she is female, for example. Another region that falls in kind of the same area is Bendel City. Um, Bendel City is the home for the Yordles. Yordles are kind of little guinea pigs on two legs. And they are really connected to the spirit world or spirit realm, but they are shown to be caring again, but it feels like it is more described as a yordle trait than a female yordle trait. Now we will have a look at different regions where femininity is kind of more more prominent or is easier to being defined than what we had until now. First, we will look at Ixtal. Ixtal is kind of is a jungle area that is shaped or that is focused on elemental power that the champions from there have. Um, we have from Ixal, we have Kiana, that is called Empress of the Elements, which gives her a status of authority, but nothing else. Then we have Nidalee, who is matriarchal leader of a pack of um, wild animals. And there is Zyra, which is kind of interesting because Zyra has not really any femininity conveyed into the story, but, and there's a big but, Zyra is a garden who has come to life from magic, and this automatically connects her to idea of females having to be fertile. But this leads Ixal to having a first, or giving us a first idea of how femininity is constructed. We see these champions taking roles of leadership, but also taking care and also, unfortunately, having to be connected to being fertile. The next city I want, or next area I want to talk are Piltover and so on. Piltover are two cities that are connected, and their backstories intertwine. If we are looking at the backstories of the champions, we can't really see any special characteristics that would be female or that would be gendered at all. But if we look at the overarching themes of the backstories, it's all about protecting the community, trying to help the community, or trying to solve the friction in the community. Next, I want to look at the Shadow Eyes. The Shadow Eyes are kind of interesting for all of this because their main theme is being alive, being not alive, and this leads to the female champion not having any trait of femininity about them, but more with how they can cope with the implications and death itself. Now I want to have a look at Ionia. Ionia is kind of interesting because it is shaped by cultural traditions. There is the hint of grey spirituality and rebellion, but this leads to, once again, femininity being not this prevalent in the backstories. Most of the female champions are only loosely gendered, while others are gendered, but even this doesn't impact really how femininity is constructed. We can, for example, look at Irelia, because her backstory is connected to dancing, grace, and tradition. This could suggest the link between femininity and artistic expression. But at the same time, this is only what she, on a personal level, took interest in as a child, and not really linked to her being female, but more linked to her embracing her traditions. The next character for Ionia who is kind of interesting is Karma, because Karma in itself is an old spiritual being that reincarnates in female inhabitants of Ionia. So if we look at how femininity is shaped, it's kind of as if you are female, you can be a host of karma. But I don't think that these can be a defining factor for femininity at all. Which once again leads us to femininity that is kind of hardly constructed at all in Ionia. Now, for the last region where femininity is kind of hard to see and hard to grasp, this region is called Bilgewater and has a pirate theme about it. We have only two female champions, but both of them are written as strong female characters that are quite forceful rather than passive at all. We have, for example, Ilaoi, which is a priestess and is one of the few champions where sexuality is brought in the foreground of their backstory. The other champion is Misfortune, and as you can hear, she has a highly gendered name. And she's also referred to in a very insulting language, and it gets also connected to the prostitution kind of scene that is happening in Bridgewater. All of this leads femininity to being described or being constructed as not gentle and not in a domestic kind of way. Instead, it is shown as being rough, independent, and dangerous, even though Bridgewater contains a strictly patriarchal structure and uses sexualized language. Now we can come to the regions where a femininity is clearly constructed, and it can be seen in many backstories and be constructed over these many backstories. First, I will start with the Messiah. The Messiah shows a strong gender diversion on paper, at least, where female champions are often tied to a marriage, to family duty, to protecting and their sexuality, while the male champions are more often associated with military life, public influence, and the freedom of doing what they want. The first example is Fiora, and she is kind of a prime example for this. She was born into royalty and is pushed towards an arranged marriage, leading her to her being protected by her father and later on killing him because he protected her. And this also leads to her being sexualized, even though the context in which this is happening is a kind of life or death scenario for the one sexualizing her. In looks, you can also see this pattern while her brother Garen is able to join the military and build her status. Lux is forced to stay at home to look at the family business, to care about the family, and is only brought to a place where she can gather influence when her brother has already gained his influence and his glory. There are also Wayne and Xena, whose backstory shows a connection to sexuality. In Wayne's backstory, it's said that she had many suitors, um, once again hinting on the female desirability and the family role, while also Senna's sexuality is discussed. This overall links femininity in Demacia strongly to social obligation. Um, it links it to marriage, taking care, having beauty, and being watched or being desired. But at the same time, women can still be and are powerful, but they must do from inside the system that keeps reminding them of their gender. The next region where it is quite easy to construct a femininity is Noxus. But Noxus shows a strong contrast to Demacia. In this region, femininity is less tied to domestic duties, but more to power, intrigue, and force. One example who puts nearly all of these traits of femininity in the backstory is Ambessa. Ambessa has the title The Matriarch of War, and this already tells us a lot. She's not framed as passive or nurturing, taking care of the home like Lux, but she's more framed as political, dangerous, and commanding. But even though her story includes motherhood and devotion, suggesting that the femininity in Noxus contains family and care, but doesn't reduce women to those roles. Other champions that show more of the intriguing part in their backstories are, for example, Elise. Elise is a Noxian noblewoman in an arranged marriage, leading to her being initially poisoned by her husband because she took leadership of the house. After this, she kills her husband, and but with this, she gets involved with the whole Black Rose story arc. The Black Rose is an underground organization that tries to lead Noxus from the shadows, and many of the female champions are connected to the Black Rose. This overall leads to a Noxian femininity that is not about peace or submission, but it's about strength, freedom, and influence. The last region I want to talk about is Freljord. Freljord has the overarching theme of female champions taking care of others. For example, Anivia, who is protecting the Freljord from others. Lysandra, who has sacrificed her sisters to protect the Freljord from the Watchers, or Aurora, who takes care of a lost spirit and tries to heal him, tries to find solution for his problem. But there are also the in-your-face parts of femininity in Freljord. For example, many of the tribes there have a matriarchal leadership structure, but this doesn't only lead to positive effects for the female champions, even though it gives them more freedom. It is still expected from them to engage in a political marriage to save the tribes from decline. This is shown in Sejuani's backstory, um, which is the child of one of these political marriages, which ends in her mother pursuing her love interest, which is followed by the decline of their tribe. The same can be seen in Ash's backstory, where she takes someone as her husband, and it's said that only over time they are developing feelings for each other. This results in a fairly clear pattern of femininity in Freljord. Women can lead, but they are also expected to maintain the tribe through marriage and care, which is interesting because it connects matriarchal authority with the strict social obligation. So, if we look at femininity in Runeterra as one thing, we can see that is really region specific and highly flexible. As said in Demacia and Freljord, femininity is strongly tied to family, marriage, duty, and social expectations, while in Bilgewater and Noxus it is associated with power, danger, and intrigue. And Piltover, Son, Ixtal, and parts of Ionia, you can see that it is linked to leadership and protection. This shows that femininity in League of Legends isn't used in a one singular formula, but it is kind of mimicking the real world, where it is on the one hand very restricting, but sometimes also empowering, and sometimes barely visible at all. I hope this kind of analysis gave you a brief idea of how femininity and how gender is constructed in Winterra. Thank you for listening, and I hope you had a great time.